Calvin Reeves was 39 years old, and until that Thursday evening, his wife believed she had married the most ordinary man in the world. He drove a used Camry. He clipped coupons. Her friends called him Boring Calvin, and she never corrected them. What none of them knew, what nobody in his personal life had ever been allowed to know, was that Calvin quietly owned one of the most profitable exotic car rental companies in the region. A seven-figure operation he built from nothing, running entirely in the background of a life he kept deliberately modest. Then his doorbell rang. He looked through the front window and watched a cherry-red Ferrari idle at his own curb. His Ferrari, from his fleet, rented by a man named Broderick Hale for $40,200. His wife came downstairs in a dress he didn't recognize, kissed Broderick on Calvin's front step, and got into Calvin's car. In that moment, Calvin Reeves did something nobody who knew him would have predicted. He didn't go outside. He sat back down at his desk, opened his laptop, and created a folder. What he built inside that folder would cost them both everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Calvin Reeves sat in the soft glow of his home office, the only sound the quiet hum of his laptop. Thursday evenings were for fleet analytics, his private ritual of reviewing the numbers that had built Apex Elite Rentals from a dream into reality. The screen showed row after row of bookings, each representing another luxury vehicle turning profit, while most of his neighbors slept. He rubbed his tired eyes, allowing himself a small smile. 12 years of marriage, and Adrienne still had no idea that her boring husband had built a seven-figure business from nothing. The used Camry in their driveway, the carefully clipped coupons, the way he let her friends dismiss him at parties. It was all part of a careful performance, not out of shame, but wisdom. A lesson learned from his father, a Memphis mechanic who taught him that flash rarely equaled substance. The memory of his father's garage came back strong. The smell of oil and metal, the radio playing old soul music, while young Calvin sat on a worn stool, reading investment books instead of comic books. Build something real, his father had said, but never let anybody see all your cards at once. Calvin glanced at the notification on his phone. Another booking confirmed, another satisfied client. He'd taught himself everything about business and finance through library books and careful observation. While other kids played video games, he studied market trends. While his cousins chased quick money, he learned about compound interest and patient capital. The sound of the doorbell pulled him from his thoughts. Through the front window, he caught sight of something that made his chest tighten. A cherry-red Ferrari 488 Spider idling at his curb. Unit 7 of his fleet. He knew every curve of that car, had personally overseen its last detailing. The booking details flashed in his mind. Broderick Hale, 3-day weekend rental. Heels clicked on the hardwood floors upstairs. Calvin stayed perfectly still, listening to his wife's movements. When Adrienne appeared at the bottom of the stairs, she wore a black cocktail dress he'd never seen before. The price tag for it probably sat somewhere in their joint account. Another silent withdrawal he'd noticed, but never questioned. "Just meeting the girls for dinner," Adrienne said, adjusting an earring. Her voice was light, practiced. "Don't wait up." Calvin watched her reflection in his laptop screen. "Have fun," he said quietly. She didn't look back as she walked to the door. Through the window, Calvin observed the scene with the detachment of someone watching security footage. Broderick Hale, tall, confident, dressed like a man who wanted to be seen, opened the Ferrari's door. The kiss they shared on Calvin's front step wasn't quick or furtive. It was comfortable, familiar. His phone buzzed. Calvin looked down at the Apex Elite dashboard. Broderick Hale, $40,200 weekend rental, paid in full. The irony might have been funny if it wasn't so brutal. This man was using Calvin's own car, paid for with Calvin's own platform, to romance Calvin's wife. The Ferrari's engine purred as it pulled away. Calvin sat in the growing darkness of his office, perfectly still. The urge to run outside, to shout, to demand answers, it rose and fell like a wave. But waves passed. Strategy remained. He looked at the laptop screen, at the numbers that had built his quiet empire. All those years of watching, waiting, building in silence, they had taught him patience. And patience, right now, was the only card worth playing. With slow, deliberate keystrokes, Calvin opened a new folder on his desktop. He named it simply Adrienne. The cursor blinked in the empty space, waiting. Like him. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded in his lap. The office was silent now, except for the soft whir of the laptop fan. Outside, crickets had started their evening chorus. Somewhere in the city, his Ferrari was carrying his wife to a dinner she wouldn't be having with friends. And here he sat, in the dark, beginning to think. All those years of people underestimating him, of Adrienne's friends calling him boring, of being dismissed as simple and predictable, they hadn't bothered him because he knew the truth. He had built something real, something valuable, something hidden. Now, looking at that empty folder on his screen, Calvin understood that it was time to build something else, a reckoning. The bedroom felt too large, too quiet. Calvin lay on his side of the bed, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. Sleep wasn't coming. His mind kept replaying the Ferrari's red gleam under the streetlights, the casual familiarity of that kiss on his front step. Around midnight, a thought pierced through the mental fog. The doorbell camera. He'd installed it 18 months ago after someone stole a package containing parts for Apex's newest Mercedes. At the time, it had seemed like simple prevention. Now, it felt like foresight. Calvin pushed himself up and walked to his office, bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The house was dark except for the blue glow of his laptop screen. He navigated to the security system's website, logged in, and accessed the video archive. The footage was organized by date, neat thumbnails showing snapshots of each recorded motion. Calvin started with today. There it was, 7:15 p.m. Adrienne walking out. Broderick opening the car door. That kiss. He watched it again, noting how neither of them checked their surroundings. They felt safe, comfortable. He began scrolling backward through the calendar. A pattern emerged, clear as spreadsheet data. 8 days ago. Broderick's silver Range Rover, 6:45 p.m. 3 weeks before that. The same car. Similar time. Calvin recognized the dates. He'd been in Atlanta, meeting with potential investors for Apex's expansion. Further back, 4 more visits in July, 3 in June. Each time the Range Rover or sometimes a black BMW would appear after sunset. Each time, Broderick would walk to the door with the confidence of someone who knew he was expected. And each time, these visits aligned perfectly with Calvin's business trips. He opened his travel calendar in another window, comparing dates. Charlotte, Miami, Houston. Every single one of Broderick's appearances matched a day when Calvin was supposed to be out of town. The precision was almost admirable. They'd been careful, methodical. Calvin thought back to those evenings, calling home from hotel rooms. Adrienne's voice, always slightly distracted. Just me and the house. You know, I like the quiet when you're gone. He'd attributed her distance to the natural drift of a 12-year marriage. How convenient that explanation had been. His phone lit up with a text. Adrienne's name appeared on the screen. Hope dinner's good. Don't wait up. Calvin stared at the message. The casual deception of it, the easy lies wrapped in manufactured warmth, it should have made him angry. Instead, he felt a strange clarity. He took a screenshot, created a new subfolder in the Adrienne directory labeled Communications, and saved it. The security footage continued its silent replay on his screen. May, April, March. The pattern held steady. 7 months of documented visits. 7 months of carefully orchestrated deception. Calvin watched it all with the same detached focus he used when analyzing market trends or evaluating fleet performance metrics. In the kitchen, he poured a glass of water. The house's silence felt different now, charged with the weight of everything he'd just confirmed. The old Calvin, the one everyone underestimated, might have reacted with hurt, with confrontation. But that wasn't who he was anymore. That wasn't who he'd been for a long time. He picked up his phone again, opened his messages, and found Wendell's contact. His uncle had run client relations at Apex since the beginning, the only person who knew the full scope of what Calvin had built. If anyone could get him the information he needed quickly and discreetly, it was Wendell. Calvin composed the text carefully. Need you to pull the full client file on a Broderick Hale first thing tomorrow morning. Everything. The message sent with a soft whoosh. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness. Somewhere in the city, his wife was having dinner with her boyfriend in a car rented from his company. The absurdity of it should have been funny. Instead, it felt like the first piece of a puzzle he hadn't known he was assembling. He sat at the kitchen counter, letting the darkness wrap around him. No lights, no movement, just the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall and the steady rhythm of his thoughts falling into place. Friday morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Calvin sat at his table, coffee untouched. His phone rang at exactly 7:15 a.m. Wendell had always been an early riser. "Morning, nephew." Wendell's familiar voice carried the weight of a sleepless night. "Got everything on your Broderick Hale? Been working on it since your text." Calvin took a slow breath. "What did you find?" "Sent you the full file, but let me walk you through it." Paper rustled on Wendell's end. 4 rentals total, spread across 14 months. First one was a Bentley Continental GT, Memorial Day weekend last year. Second booking was the Aston Martin DB11 in September. Then the Ferrari 458 Italia in January. Latest was the 488 Spider he's got now. Calvin opened his laptop, finding Wendell's email already waiting. The spreadsheet was meticulous. Dates, times, vehicle details, payment information. Wendell's attention to detail had always been one of Apex's greatest assets. "All charged to the same card?" Calvin asked, though he already knew the answer. "Corporate American Express, Hale Premier Properties." More shuffling of papers. "Man likes the flash. Always takes our highest-end options. Adds every premium package available. Total spending across all rentals comes to just under $20,000. Calvin pulled up his personal calendar in another window, the one tracking his business travel. He began matching dates, a familiar hollowness settling in his chest as the pattern emerged. Memorial Day weekend, he'd been in Phoenix meeting fleet suppliers. September booking, Charlotte Investor Conference. January rental, Miami expansion talks. Insurance forms all list him as sole driver, Wendell continued. Though interesting thing, he always picks up after business hours. Latest one was 7 p.m. yesterday. Most clients doing corporate rentals collect during the day. Calvin thought of Broderick's confident stride to his front door last night, how practiced it had looked. How many times had that walk been rehearsed in other borrowed cars, all while Calvin was supposedly safely out of town? Any issues with the vehicles? Calvin kept his voice neutral. Perfect record. Returns them clean, on time. Full tank. Model client on paper. Wendell paused. "Calvin, why are we looking into this? Something wrong with his latest booking? Due diligence on a repeat client." The lie felt smooth, necessary, considering him for our premium membership program. Wendell's silence carried weight. His uncle had always been able to read between Calvin's lines, but he also knew when not to push. "All right. Need anything else pulled?" "No, this is thorough." Calvin studied the rental agreement signatures on his screen. Broderick's confident scrawl claiming company business purpose on each one. "Thank you, Uncle." After ending the call, Calvin sat motionless for several minutes, letting the full picture settle. Broderick Hale had spent nearly $20,000 of his company's money renting luxury cars from Calvin's business. Not for clients, not for deals, but to impress Calvin's wife. The calculated arrogance of it was almost artistic. He opened the Adrienne folder, creating a new section for the Apex records. Each rental agreement told its own story now. Dates chosen specifically for Calvin's absences, cars selected for maximum impact. Even the pickup times showed planning, arranged for when neighborhood activity would be minimal. Calvin picked up his phone again, scrolling to another familiar number. It rang twice. Calvin. Priya's voice was clear, professional. Early for you to call. Need your help with something. He turned to face the window, watching morning traffic pass. I want a complete marital asset review. Every account, every transaction, going back 3 years. The silence on Priya's end was brief, but loaded. As both his attorney and friend, she understood that this request marked a line being crossed. What level of detail? Everything. Joint accounts, individual accounts, credit cards, investments, any movement over $100. That's comprehensive. Her tone remained neutral. Timeline? Preliminary, by Monday if possible. I'll clear my weekend. Papers shuffled. Priya was already making notes. Calvin, do you want to tell me what triggered this? Not yet. He watched a red car pass his house. Not the Ferrari, just a regular sedan. Just need to know where everything stands. All right, I'll start today. A pause. Call if you need anything before Monday. Calvin ended the call and turned back to his laptop. He created another subfolder in the Adrienne directory, labeled it Financial, and began uploading the Apex rental records. Each document represented a choice Broderick had made, a calculated risk taken with company funds. Each date marked a time Adrienne had chosen deception over truth. The coffee beside him had gone cold, untouched. Monday morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Priya's downtown office. Calvin sat across from her at the polished conference table, watching as she methodically arranged stacks of documents. Her movements were precise, almost surgical, as she created an orderly timeline of financial records. I cleared my entire weekend for this, Priya said, her voice carrying the weight of discovered certainties. She slid the first set of papers toward Calvin. The joint account analysis is where we start. It tells the clearest story. Calvin leaned forward, studying the highlighted transactions. Each page showed regular withdrawals, $200 here, $350 there, sometimes as much as $500, but never more. Small enough to seem routine, regular enough to add up. She was careful, Priya continued, tapping a manicured nail against a particularly dense cluster of transactions. Never took enough at once to trigger fraud alerts or catch your attention. But over 2 years, she pulled out a summary sheet. The total diversion comes to $47,000. Calvin's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened slightly on the paper's edge. Where did it go? Priya extracted another document from her stack. Most of it traces to this savings account at First Regional. She slid the account summary across. Opened 26 months ago. Sole owner Adrienne Reeves. Current balance just over $38,000. And the remaining $9,000? That's where it gets interesting. Priya's tone sharpened. Some went to cash withdrawals we can't track. But about $4,000 came from an unauthorized source entirely. She produced another document. This transfer came from the operating account of Cedar Heights LLC, your rental property holding company, an account Adrienne has no legal authorization to access. Calvin studied the transfer record. The date was familiar, right around when Adrienne had started talking about launching her lifestyle brand. That moves this beyond divorce territory. Correct. Priya's eyes narrowed. Unauthorized access to a business account is a civil liability issue at minimum. Depending on how she gained access, there could be other implications. She stood, walking to a side table to pour water for them both. But there's more. The kitchen renovation from last spring raised several red flags. Calvin accepted the water glass, but didn't drink. The $40,000 remodel she insisted on managing. The same. Priya returned with another folder. I contacted the contractor directly. The final scope of work was significantly reduced from the original quote. Fewer custom cabinets, standard rather than premium fixtures, no island extension. She laid out the revised work order. The actual cost came to $22,000, but you reimbursed her for the full $40,000 from your joint account. $18,000. Calvin's voice was quiet. She pocketed the difference. The contractor assumed you knew about the changes. She presented herself as managing the project on your behalf. Priya's expression tightened. There's a pattern here, Calvin. Systematic financial deception over an extended period. Small extractions that became larger ones. Unauthorized access to business accounts. Fraudulent reimbursement schemes. She was building an exit fund, preparing to leave on her terms, with a cushion built from your money. Calvin stood, walking to the window. Downtown traffic flowed below. People moving through their Monday routines, unaware of private dissolutions happening in glass towers above them. Document everything, he said finally. But don't file anything yet. You want to hold? Priya's tone was neutral, but questioning. I need the full picture before we move. He turned back to face her. How long can we sit on this? Given the statute of limitations on the financial issues, we have time. She began gathering the documents into a fresh folder. But Calvin, this type of behavior rarely improves. If anything, the pattern suggests escalation. I understand. He accepted the folder from her, its weight substantial with evidence. Send me your full report by end of day. I'll let you know when I'm ready to proceed. Back in his car, the used Camry that had become its own kind of camouflage, Calvin placed Priya's folder carefully in his briefcase. The Adrienne file was growing, each new addition revealing deeper layers of calculated deception. He checked his watch. Still time to stop at the grocery store. Maintain the routine Adrienne expected. Driving home, he mentally reviewed the dinner he'd planned to cook. Something simple, but time-consuming. Something that would explain his absence all morning. Something that would let him stand at the counter and chop vegetables with steady hands while his mind processed numbers. $47,000. $18,000. 2 years of small withdrawals, adding up to one massive betrayal. He would make dinner. They would eat. She would ask about his morning, and he would mention running errands. Life would continue its performance, while beneath the surface, evidence accumulated in carefully labeled folders. Monday evening's kitchen held the warm aroma of herb-roasted chicken and garlic. Calvin moved with practiced ease, plating the food while Adrienne leaned against the counter, wineglass in hand. Her smile carried the relaxed confidence of someone who believed they held all the cards. "This looks amazing," she said, sliding onto her usual chair. "I feel like we haven't had a proper dinner together in ages." Calvin set her plate down with care. "Work's been busy for both of us." He took his seat, noting how she'd positioned her phone face down, but within easy reach, a habit he'd started tracking 3 days ago. "Speaking of work," Adrienne twirled pasta around her fork. "I've been thinking about making some changes. Professional changes." "Oh?" Calvin kept his tone interested but neutral. "I've been developing this concept for a lifestyle brand. Curated home goods, entertaining tips, maybe some fashion elements." Her eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "The market is really good for that right now, especially with my social media following." Calvin nodded, remembering the $4,000 she'd transferred from his LLC account. "That sounds interesting. Tell me more." "Well, it would need some startup capital." She watched him carefully. "But I really think I could make something special. Would you be supportive if I pursued this?" "Of course." Calvin met her gaze steadily. "I'll always support you pursuing what matters to you." Her smile widened, missing entirely the precise meaning of his words. Over the next few days, Calvin maintained a flawless performance of domestic normality. He complimented Tuesday's takeout choices. He asked about her Wednesday lunch meeting. Thursday evening found them on the couch, sharing space while some reality show played. Her choice. He noted how often her phone buzzed, how she angled the screen away while typing responses. Between these moments of choreographed marriage, Calvin moved pieces into position. Tuesday morning, he called Wendell. "I need all future bookings from Hale Premier Properties flagged for my personal review," he said. "Route them through secondary approval before confirmation." "Any particular reason?" Wendell's tone suggested he already had theories. "Just keeping track of our high-value clients." Wednesday brought lunch at Morton's with Terrence Wade. Calvin had chosen the restaurant carefully. Upscale enough to suggest serious business, private enough for honest conversation. Wade arrived looking harried, the slight dishevelment of a man carrying too many concerns. "Appreciate you making time," Calvin said as they settled into a corner booth. "I know you're busy with the new development project." Wade's laugh held little humor. "Busy is one word for it. Speaking of which, this fleet partnership you mentioned, what exactly did you have in mind?" Calvin spent the next 20 minutes outlining a hypothetical arrangement between Apex Elite and Hale Premier Properties. Corporate rates, priority booking, the kind of deal that would justify this lunch. All while watching Wade's reactions to specific details. The expenditure tracking would be transparent, of course, Calvin mentioned casually. "All rentals itemized for your accounting department." Wade's expression tightened. Transparency would be refreshing. He pushed his salad around. "Between us, we're having some internal discussions about expense documentation. Certain charges that haven't been properly itemized. That must be frustrating, especially when those charges keep appearing without explanation." Wade's fork clinked against his plate. "And my partner seems increasingly defensive about providing details." Calvin listened, asked careful questions, and filed away every word. By dessert, he had confirmation of what the rental records suggested. Growing friction between partners, one of whom was using company funds for personal purposes, while the other accumulated grievances. Returning home that afternoon, Calvin found a note from Adrienne on the counter. "Running errands, back for dinner. XO." In his home office, he updated the growing folder with notes from lunch. Then he pulled up his calendar and began creating a business trip to Nashville. Flight details, hotel confirmation, careful scheduling for Friday through Sunday. At dinner that evening, he waited until she was reaching for the bread basket. "Nearly forgot to mention, I have to head to Nashville this weekend. Last-minute client meeting." He kept his tone casual, mildly apologetic. "Flying out Friday morning. Back Sunday night." "Oh." Adrienne's hand paused briefly before taking a roll. "That's short notice. Nature of the business sometimes." He offered her the butter. "You'll be okay here by yourself?" "Of course." She smiled, spreading butter with steady hands. "You know me. I like the quiet when you're away." Calvin nodded, watching her carefully maintained expression. "I know you do." Friday morning arrived with a thin autumn chill. Calvin wheeled his carry-on bag to the Camry while Adrienne stood in the doorway, wrapped in her silk robe. The neighborhood was quiet except for distant lawn mowers and the scratch of fallen leaves against concrete. "Text me when you land," she said, adjusting his collar in a gesture that once would have felt intimate. "Of course." He kissed her cheek, noting the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume. "Don't work too hard on the brand planning while I'm gone." Her laugh held genuine amusement. Someone has to have ambition in this marriage. Calvin smiled, letting the barb land without reaction. He backed out of the driveway, watching in his rearview mirror as she went inside, without waiting for him to turn the corner. The airport terminal buzzed with typical Friday morning energy. Business travelers with their efficient movements, families heading for weekend getaways. Calvin checked his bag, cleared security, and settled at his gate with a coffee and his laptop. He had chosen a window seat on the short flight to Nashville. The plane landed just after 11. Calvin collected his bag, took a shuttle to his hotel, a mid-range Marriott near downtown, and checked into a room on the 7th floor. He ordered a club sandwich from room service and opened his laptop, reviewing work emails while he waited. The sandwich arrived lukewarm. He ate half. As afternoon light faded into evening, Calvin gathered what he needed from his bag: a small camera, his phone, and a portable battery pack. He caught a ride back to the airport and approached the Enterprise counter. "Reservation for Charles Richards," he said, using one of Apex's business aliases. The agent handed him keys to a charcoal-gray Ford F-150, common enough to be forgettable on any street. The drive back took just under 3 hours. Traffic thinned as night settled in, dashboard lights casting a green glow across Calvin's steady hands on the wheel. He had chosen his route carefully, avoiding major highways near the city where traffic cameras might log his return. At 9:47 p.m., Calvin parked the truck on Oak Avenue, 2 streets from his house. The residential block was dark and quiet, most windows already dimmed. He had an unobstructed view of his driveway through a gap between houses. A black BMW M5 sat in his driveway, Broderick's personal car, not an Apex rental. Calvin recognized it from previous surveillance photos. He activated the camera's night mode and documented the scene: timestamp, license plate, position in the driveway. The bedroom lights were on upstairs. The hours passed with glacial patience. Calvin kept his phone on silent, tracking movement through the house by lights switching on and off. At 11:20, the bedroom went dark. At 1:15, a brief kitchen light. At 3:40, the master bathroom. Dawn crept in with heavy fog, the kind that made all houses look slightly unreal. At 6:07 a.m., Calvin photographed Broderick's car still parked exactly where it had been. Evidence of a full night spent in Calvin's house, in Calvin's bed. His phone buzzed. An email from Wendell, flagged urgent. New reservation request from Hale Premier Properties vehicle. Lamborghini Urus, black. Dates, next weekend, Fry Sun. Notes, anniversary trip requires owner approval per protocol. Calvin opened the Apex booking system on his phone. With precise movements, he approved the reservation, added a complimentary upgrade to their premium Urus package, and included the champagne service normally reserved for celebrity clients. In the booking notes field, he typed, "From the team at Apex Elite, we take care of our most valued clients." His finger hovered over the signature line. Then he typed simply, "CR." The fog was beginning to lift as Calvin started the truck. He had a plane to catch, a performance to maintain. The drive back to Nashville felt shorter, his mind already moving to the next phase of what he had set in motion. By the time his scheduled return flight landed Sunday evening, Broderick's BMW would be long gone from the driveway. Adrian would have changed the sheets, aired out the house, erased the visible evidence. But the photos were already saved, the reservation confirmed, the signature sent. Calvin merged onto the highway heading east, leaving his house and its occupants behind in the gray morning light. He had a flight to catch in Nashville, right on schedule. Monday morning arrived with steel-gray clouds and a hint of rain. Calvin walked into Priya's office carrying a black leather briefcase that held the complete Adrienne folder, now nearly 2 inches thick, with colored tabs marking key sections. The weight felt significant in his hand. Priya's office occupied a corner suite in a renovated brick building downtown. Her desk, as always, was precisely organized, files aligned, pens arranged, everything in its place. She gestured to the conference table where they had spread out the initial financial records a week ago. "Show me what else you've gathered," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. Calvin opened the briefcase and removed the folder. He placed it on the polished wood surface with deliberate care, like setting down something volatile. The tabs created a rainbow edge: red for financial records, blue for surveillance, yellow for rental documentation, green for the renovation fraud. Everything's here, he said. Every transaction, every rental, every unauthorized access. The whole story. Priya opened the folder and began methodically reviewing each section. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyebrows lifted slightly at certain documents, particularly the photographs from Saturday morning showing Broderick's car in Calvin's driveway at 6:07 a.m. "The financial picture is absolutely clear," she said, after 20 minutes of review. "Adrienne's systematic withdrawal of funds over 2 years demonstrates intent. The unauthorized transfer from your LLC account crosses a serious legal line. The renovation fraud provides additional evidence of calculated deception." She looked up. "In terms of divorce proceedings, your position is exceptionally strong." Calvin nodded. "And the rental records? They establish a clear timeline of the affair and document Broderick's misuse of company resources. More importantly, they demonstrate premeditation. He deliberately scheduled these rentals around your business travel." Priya closed the folder. "I can file everything tomorrow if you want." "Not yet," Calvin said. "Hold the documents, but have them ready. I need to make one more call first." He took out his phone and dialed Terrence Wade's direct line. Wade answered on the second ring. "Calvin, good morning. How are you?" "I'm well, Terrence. Do you have a moment? There's something I need to bring to your attention as a matter of professional courtesy." There was a brief pause. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Calvin kept his voice measured, factual. "In reviewing Apex Elite's rental records, I noticed that Broderick's company card has been used to expense personal luxury vehicle rentals consistently over the past 14 months. The total charges exceed $40,000, none of which appear to be legitimate business expenses." The silence on the other end lengthened. When Wade spoke again, his voice had cooled noticeably. "I see. And you can document this pattern? Every rental, every date, every charge. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," Wade said. His tone suggested he was already thinking several moves ahead. "This information will be helpful in some discussions I need to have internally." "I thought it might be," Calvin said simply. After ending the call, he looked at Priya. "Wade will move quickly now. He's been looking for leverage in their partnership dispute. This gives him what he needs." Priya nodded, understanding. "And the next step?" Calvin picked up his phone again and scrolled to Gloria Whitfield's number. He had called Adrienne's mother exactly twice in 12 years of marriage. This would be the third time. The phone rang 3 times before Gloria answered, her voice carrying its usual note of barely concealed condescension. "Calvin? This is unexpected." "Hello, Gloria. I was hoping to ask a favor." He kept his tone warm, pleasant. "Would it be possible for Adrienne and me to join you for dinner this Sunday? Just family? There's something important I'd like to share." "Well," he could hear her mental calculations, "I suppose that would be fine. Around 6? 6 would be perfect. Thank you, Gloria." After hanging up, Calvin sat quietly for a moment. The Adrienne folder lay closed on the table between him and Priya. Months of evidence, years of deception, all of it documented and organized and ready. He picked it up and placed it carefully in his briefcase. "Sunday is 4 days away," Priya said. Calvin closed the briefcase latches with 2 soft clicks. "Yes," he said. "It is." The gray clouds outside had thickened, threatening rain. Calvin could see his reflection in Priya's office window. Calm, contained. A man who had waited long enough. Gloria Whitfield's house sat on a corner lot in an old money neighborhood, its brick facade and manicured shrubs projecting exactly the image she had spent decades maintaining. Calvin parked his Camry at the curb at 5:57 p.m., the Adrienne folder resting in his briefcase on the passenger seat. Through the dining room window, he could see Adrienne already seated at the table, laughing at something Gloria had said. The autumn air carried a slight chill as Calvin walked up the brick path to the front door. He adjusted his navy sport coat, the one Adrienne had always said made him look presentable, and rang the bell. Gloria opened the door wearing an apron over her designer dress, the picture of domestic sophistication. Calvin, right on time as always. Her smile carried its usual hint of evaluation. "Come in. Dinner's nearly ready." The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread. Gloria's standard Sunday menu. Adrienne rose to greet him with a quick kiss on the cheek, her perfume familiar and suddenly strange. "I got here early to help Mom with the sides," she said. Calvin nodded, noting how relaxed she was, how certain of her ground. "Can I help bring anything to the table?" he asked Gloria. "No need. Everything's ready. Just have a seat." Gloria carried in a platter of perfectly browned chicken. "I made your favorite rosemary potatoes, Calvin." They settled into their usual chairs, Gloria at the head of the table, Adrienne and Calvin facing each other across its polished mahogany surface. The briefcase rested against Calvin's chair leg. Gloria said, "Grace," her usual brief blessing, while Adrienne bowed her head demurely. The first few minutes passed in ordinary dinner conversation. Gloria discussed her garden club's upcoming fall competition. Adrienne mentioned a charity event she was helping organize. Calvin listened, responded appropriately, and waited until the initial eating rhythm had been established. When Gloria paused to refill her water glass, Calvin reached down and lifted his briefcase onto his lap. The slight movement drew both women's attention. He rarely brought work materials to dinner. "Before we continue," he said quietly, "there's something I need to share with both of you." He removed the Adrienne folder and placed it precisely in the center of the table, between the chicken platter and bowl of potatoes. Adrienne's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What's that?" Calvin opened the folder with careful deliberation. "Gloria," he said, looking directly at his mother-in-law, "I want to walk you through some information I've discovered over the past few weeks. I believe you deserve to hear it firsthand." He began with the doorbell camera footage timestamps, laying out printed screenshots showing Broderick's Ferrari, and later his personal car, appearing at their house during Calvin's business trips. Each image was labeled with date and time. "Calvin, this isn't—" Adrienne started. He continued speaking to Gloria in the same measured tone, acknowledging Adrienne's interruption only by slightly raising his volume. "These visits correlate exactly with my travel schedule for Apex Elite Rentals, my company, which handles luxury vehicle rentals. Mr. Hale was actually renting cars from my fleet to facilitate these visits." Gloria's expression had frozen, her water glass suspended halfway to her lips. Calvin moved methodically through the financial records next. Bank statements highlighting the pattern of small withdrawals. Spreadsheets totaling the $47,000 Adrienne had methodically siphoned over 2 years. "This isn't appropriate dinner conversation." Adrienne tried again, her voice tight. Calvin turned to the renovation documentation. The kitchen remodel last spring was quoted at $42,000. Adrienne negotiated it down to $24,000, but submitted the original quote for reimbursement. The difference went to her private account. He slid the contractor's signed statement across the table. Gloria had not moved. Her water glass now rested on the table, untouched. The unauthorized LLC transfer documentation came last. Calvin presented it with the same professional clarity he would use in a business meeting. When he finished, he closed the folder and looked at Gloria. "I wanted you to hear this from me first," he said quietly, "because you will hear a version of it from her, and I wanted you to have the truth." He stood, tucking the folder back into his briefcase. "Priya will be in touch Monday morning," he said to Adrienne, whose face had drained of color. Without another word, he walked out of the dining room and through the front door. Gloria did not follow to see him out. As Calvin reached his car, he heard no voices from the house behind him, only silence. He placed his briefcase on the passenger seat and started the engine. The drive to Broderick Hale's office building would take exactly 17 minutes. The lobby of Hale Premier Properties gleamed with the artificial warmth of Sunday evening security lighting. A cleaning crew was finishing up, their vacuums humming in distant corridors. The front desk sat empty except for a young security guard scrolling on his phone, barely glancing up as Calvin walked past. The elevator ride to the 14th floor was silent except for the soft ping of passing floors. Calvin had chosen this moment carefully. Sunday evening meant minimal staff, no executive assistants, no buffer between himself and Broderick Hale. The deal Terrence Wade had mentioned, a mixed-use development on the east side, would close Tuesday. That meant Broderick would be here, as he always was before major closings, fine-tuning numbers and reviewing contracts. The 14th floor was mostly dark, except for light spilling from the corner office. Calvin's footsteps echoed softly on marble tile as he approached. Through the glass walls, he could see Broderick at his desk, suit jacket draped over his chair, shirt sleeves rolled up as he studied something on his laptop screen. The Ferrari's key fob sat next to his mousepad. Unit 7, still in his possession for another day. Calvin opened the door without knocking. Broderick looked up, his expression shifting from irritation to recognition to something more complex. He had always known exactly who Calvin was. That was part of the thrill, Calvin realized. Dating a colleague's wife might be risky, but seducing the wife of someone you considered beneath you? That was power. "Mr. Reeves," Broderick said, recovering quickly. "This is unexpected." Calvin sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, placing his briefcase on his lap. "I'll be brief." He removed 2 documents and laid them precisely on the polished desk surface. The first was an Apex Elite invoice, professionally formatted, itemizing every rental Broderick had made over the past 14 months. Each entry had been recalculated at personal rather than corporate rates, with breach of commercial use penalties applied per the rental agreement Broderick had signed. The total at the bottom was substantial, just over $27,000. The second document was a summary of expenditure queries Terrence Wade had submitted to their company accountant that afternoon. The highlighted items included every car rental, every dinner, every hotel charge Broderick had filed as business expenses while pursuing Adrienne. Questions that would now require detailed explanation. Broderick glanced at both papers, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. The office was silent except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. "You rented 4 cars from my company," Calvin said quietly. "You used my cars to take my wife to places funded by money she stole from me, and you expensed your half to a partnership you're already losing." Broderick's fingers tapped once on his desk, the only visible sign of tension. "I assume you're here to negotiate." "No." Calvin's voice remained level. "I'm here to collect. The invoice is due in 30 days. Priya knows where your assets are." He stood, smoothing his sport coat. Broderick's expression had shifted again, the confidence draining away as he fully processed the architecture of his situation. This wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't even revenge. It was simply business, executed by someone who had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. Calvin walked to the door without looking back. Behind him, Broderick sat motionless, staring at 2 pieces of paper that represented the end of everything he had built. The cleaning crew's vacuum cleaner echoed from somewhere down the hall, an ordinary sound on what had become, for Broderick Hale, an extraordinary evening. The security guard was still scrolling on his phone when Calvin passed through the lobby. Outside, the autumn air had grown colder. Calvin's Camry waited at the curb, reliable and unremarkable, exactly like its owner, until tonight. Broderick remained at his desk, alone with the specific dread of a man who had just understood, fully and too late, who he had actually been dealing with. The invoice and expenditure summary lay on his desk like prosecution exhibits. Every line item represented a choice he had made, each one now returning with compound interest. The autumn sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows in Calvin's new office, warming the glass surface of his desk, where Memphis Business Quarterly lay open to a 6-page feature spread. The magazine's glossy pages showed Calvin standing beside Unit 7, the cherry-red Ferrari 488 Spider that had started everything. His smile in the photo was genuine, relaxed. The headline read, "Apex Elite: How Calvin Reeves Built Memphis's Premier Luxury Car Service." He picked up his coffee mug, ceramic and simple, and looked out over the expanded lot, where 30 high-end vehicles gleamed in the morning light. Apex Elite's second location had opened 3 months ago across town, doubling their fleet capacity. The waiting list for weekend bookings stretched 2 months deep. The consequences of that Sunday dinner had unfolded like a quiet avalanche. Terrence Wade's internal audit of Hale Premier Properties revealed more than just improperly expensed car rentals. Pattern after pattern emerged. Personal trips, logged as business development, inflated client entertainment charges, systematic misuse of company resources. The partnership dispute that followed was expensive and public. Local business papers covered it with barely concealed satisfaction. Watching Broderick Hale's carefully crafted image crumble had made for compelling copy. Broderick fought back, of course. But fighting required explaining, and explaining meant documentation. And documentation was exactly what he didn't have. By the time the dust settled, his ownership stake was significantly diluted, his decision-making authority restricted by new partnership agreements. He still had his title, but everyone in Memphis real estate knew what that title was worth now. The invoice Calvin had left on his desk that Sunday night, paid in full 30 days later, with a cashier's check delivered by courier. No note attached. Adrienne's portion of the story resolved with similar inevitability. Priya's filing was comprehensive, leaving no room for negotiation. The $47,000 she had siphoned became part of the settlement calculation, along with the renovation fraud and unauthorized LLC transfer. The lifestyle brand she'd been planning never materialized. Her carefully cultivated social media presence went quiet, then private, then dormant. She moved back to Gloria's house during the proceedings, expecting the unconditional support she'd always received. But Gloria had sat at that Sunday dinner table. She had watched her daughter face Calvin's evidence without denial or defense. Something fundamental had shifted in that moment, not just about Adrienne, but about Gloria's own role in creating her. The house that should have been a refuge became instead a quiet purgatory of abbreviated conversations and closed doors. Calvin's new apartment occupied the top floor of a renovated downtown warehouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with natural light, more than the house had ever seen. The kitchen featured a professional-grade range where he cooked elaborate Sunday breakfast, rediscovering a hobby he'd somehow lost during the marriage. Friends visited often now. He hosted dinner parties. He laughed easily. He was not bitter. Bitterness required ongoing emotional investment in people who no longer deserved it. He had given the situation exactly as much energy as it required. No more, no less. The folder labeled Adrienne sat in a filing cabinet, untouched since the final settlement signing. Its work was done. His desk phone buzzed. "Calvin?" Wendell's voice carried its usual warm efficiency. "Got a new client inquiry for Unit 7. Full weekend rental, premium package." Calvin glanced out at the Ferrari gleaming in the morning sun. "Confirm it at full rate. Still the most popular car in the fleet," Wendell said. Calvin could hear the smile in his voice. "It always was," Calvin replied. He hung up and lifted his coffee mug, now empty. Through the windows, he watched a young couple approach the Lamborghini Urus, one of their newest acquisitions. Their excited gestures and wide eyes reminded him why he'd built this in the first place, not just as a business, but as a way to make dreams tangible, if only for a weekend. The magazine still lay open on his desk, his own face looking back at him from the glossy pages. He closed it and turned to his laptop, where fleet analytics and booking projections waited for review. There was work to do. There was always work to do, and he was grateful for it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out two more for you that I think you'll really like.